So let's talk IP addresses. I've been wanting to do this topic for a while now, and I think I finally got it set up and I can make this happen. So obviously I'm driving. I'm Eli the electronics guy, and yeah, let's dive into it. So IP addresses. I'm not talking about IPv6. We're talking about just plain old IPv4. I've been in the IT industry for a little over 10 years now and dealt with plenty of IP addresses. Give a little background. I used to own a wireless internet business. Was a WISP there for about 8 years. Started that from the ground up, and yeah, that's where I got a lot of my networking skills. So being in the IT industry, I'm kind of working as a consultant kind of thing. The company I work for, I won't name them, but we do a lot of integration with other networks is where I'll put it at. So I deal with a wide gamut of IT people. Now, I haven't had this issue in years, it's probably been, but it's super frustrating. So IP addresses, give a little background. What is an IP address? The best way I can describe an IP address is it's basically a phone number. Every computer has to have one. If it's on a network or on the internet, you have to have an IP address. Now, most everybody, you have your Wi-Fi at home or you're hardwired at home going through a router. So you have what they call a private IP address. That's that 192.168 number that you see a lot of times. So that's your IP address. That's your internal IP. And then that goes through your router, and then your router gets a public IP address from your ISP or your internet service provider. So the router does all the fancy conversion from your internal to your public or your private to public IP addresses. It does all that conversion for you. And all the computers can share that one public IP address. So where I want to kind of go with this, yes, I'm sorry, I'll warn you ahead of time, it is a little bit of a rant. My issue comes down to static and DHCP. DHCP is basically where the DHCP server, again, normally your router, in a lot of corporate environments, other networks, it's actually a physical server that handles that. So that server hands out IP addresses from a pool, and it says, okay, what do I have available? A computer says, hey, I'm online, I need an IP address, and it'll grab one from that pool and issue it. Great, no middleman, nobody needing to do anything with it, it just works. It's great. Awesome for just basic computers. Awesome. When it comes to devices that you connect to regularly, so let's say a printer, servers, you get like a file server, stuff like that. Static is better. Static is really good because that IP address never changes. It's basically static to that one device. So the problem with static addresses is it takes management. You have to have somebody that physically enters that into that device, and it is basically in that device and it never goes away. And then you have to, and this is where the rant comes in, you need to keep track of what IP addresses you have used. Because some devices, there's what they call pinging. You can ping a device and it basically says, hey, is there anything on this address? Most devices will respond back and say, yep, I'm right here. But for security reasons, a lot of newer devices don't respond to pings, because that was that was a way to find out if you had something on their IP address, and then they could start attacking it. So a lot of newer devices just won't respond. Even though they're there, even though they have that IP address, they just won't respond to a ping. That's where it becomes into an issue, is when IT people try to do what I call, I don't know if it's an industry term, but I call it a ping audit. Basically, you go through your network and you say, okay, I want to ping this address to this address, the whole pool. And it runs through, it's a program, and it'll say, okay, you got devices here, 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 and here. Well, the problem is if your device doesn't respond to that ping, guess what? Now you think you have an IP address that's available, and it's not available. It is being used. So then when you issue that IP address to some other device, now you have duplicate IPs on your network, and it causes major networking issues. So, how many times have I had this happen to me when it's been my network? None. None, none, none. And I am not the most organized person. I will admit it. It's just not my forte. But for some reason, when it comes to IP addresses, I can manage it. And when I did the ISP stuff, I had my server, and it could do DHCP. Well, I wouldn't use DHCP because I didn't want people to be able to just get into the network and be able to get online. Everything was static. Granted, it was a lot more management, but in the long run, I feel it made it better. So with that, what I did is most DHCP servers do what they call IP reservations. So again, it's a little bit of a hybrid of a static and non-static DHCP. It basically, the computer still requests an IP address, just like in that DHCP example, but instead of just picking from the pool, the DHCP server says, oh, okay, I have this IP address that's meant for you, so here you go. And it always gives and saves that one address for that one device. A little bit of a hybrid, little less management potential, but again, the problem is if that DHCP server is down, now that device doesn't work at all. Where in the static example, if the DHCP server down, if everything in the whole network is down except that one switch that those devices are talking together with, they'll still work. That's why I like static, is it just adds, I feel, a layer of redundancy to the system. So what I would do is I would designate an IP address. Granted, I was working with all internal IPs, so I was not doing public stuff. So sorry if you're thinking I'm talking about public IP addresses. I'm strictly talking internal IPv4. So I would take those and I would designate them. Their MAC address for that device, it's a hard-coded address on the device. I'd say, okay, this MAC address gets this IP address and it's associated with this client. Worked great. Never once had an issue. Now, moving into the role where I work with multiple IT people, and we have to request IP addresses from them when we connect to our equipment to their network. In theory, if they just kept track of it, I don't care if it's on an Excel spreadsheet or what, but if they'd keep track of it, it would be fine. Like I said, I haven't had this problem in years, but there for a while I was getting it quite often and it was a pain. And what they would do is they would assign us a list of say 5 or 10 addresses. Worked great, for a while. Well, then all of a sudden we'd start having issues. We'd go out and look at it and it would be that they had, say, a printer taking up one of our IP addresses. And it's like, why did you do this? And they're like, oh, well, my bad. Here's a whole nother group of IPs. And it's like, our equipment, we can't just change IP addresses on the fly. Like, it doesn't, some stuff doesn't like that. It's hard coded that, there's a lot more work than just changing some numbers and calling it a day. It's not like a printer. Granted, a printer is even a pain in the butt to do that too, because then you got to go through all the other clients and rechange their mapping for that printer. But anyways, I'll wrap this up. So long story short, if you're going to do static IP addresses, just have a master list somewhere. I don't care if that's on a server, on the DHCP reservations. Even if you're not doing DHCP, you still reserve it somewhere. I don't care. Even an Excel document, a notepad document. As long as you have some list somewhere that anybody in the IT field can, that's part of your corporation or entity, can look it up. That's all you have to do. Just track it and you're good. And then the nice thing is, if you do have a problem with a device, you can look back at that list and say, oh, it's this IP address. I know exactly where that's at. Imagine that. So anyways, I've been wanting to make this video for a super long time, And yeah, so that's IP addresses, and I guess have a list. Cool. See you guys.